On September 28th of 1984, Omar Conger, 28 years old, he and a friend Chris Rim, they had gone out to Pigeon Point in California to do some diving. The two gentlemen, it's about 8 o'clock, just after 8 in the morning, 8:15 in the morning, and they're 150 meters from shore. They're in about 12 feet deep water, and like I said, it's about 8:30 in the morning, 8:15 in the morning, and they have a dive mat with them to put things on when they go down and dive and pick something up. I don't know what they were collecting. Chris Rim has a dive mat. Omar Conger is looking out to sea, close by Chris Rim, facing out to sea, when suddenly a shark comes up behind him, grabbing him by the legs and thrashing him around as it drags him under the water. So it grabbed his legs and started shaking as it took him under. So Chris Rim is sitting there, he sees a shark grab him, shake as it takes him under, and seconds later he sees the shark go all the way to the bottom. The shark attacked him twice, so it grabbed him by the legs and took him under. At some point it readjusted, and it sounds like it grabbed him more by the waist when it took him back up to the top of the surface, because it took him to the bottom of the water, 12 to 15 feet down, took him all the way to the seafloor and brought him all the way back up to Rim and released Omar right there by Chris Rim. Chris Rim was able to take Omar and put him up onto the mat and starts taking him into shore. Omar was talking to Chris as they got in, but by the time they made it in, it sounds like Omar had passed away from his loss of blood from the bite. He ended up with bite wounds to his legs, to his torso, and lost a lot of blood through this. Even though there wasn't any flesh removal that was mentioned, he still passes away from the attack. Now, Chris Rim, when he gets near the beach, he shouts out, there's a couple other spear fishermen or divers that are only about 100 yards from where they were, and he's shouting out to them to get out of the water. So they swim their way in. Now, there's two different stories of what they saw, and both of them happened right at the same time in the papers, right when it came out. One story says the two other divers came up to the beach, got out of the water, and looked and saw, and said sure enough, his buddy that he said was attacked by the shark was laying there on the beach. The other story is that they saw it, that they were aware that this attack happened, and then they came in, but from what I hear, it sounds more like that they didn't know what was going on until Chris Rim yelled to them to get out of the water. It ends up being about a 12-foot great white shark that grabbed a hold of him and took him to the seafloor. And like I said, grabbed him by the legs first, so it must have let go and repurchased him again in a different spot, because he had more wounds going up his body than just his lower legs, which he was taken under with the shaking on. So that's the attack, a terrible attack. Chris Rim had to, live with this thing the rest of his life, watching his buddy being shaken like a dog, and when he's taken underwater like a dog's toy, and then brought right back to him and just dropped off by the shark. So a crazy attack. It was one of the first that I realized that, hey, these sharks, when they're attacking, feeding is not what they're about all the time. And we had covered enough by the time I got to Omar Conger that I finally started saying, look, these things are not trying to feed when they're doing this, and these attacks are different. So Omar Conger, that's why I wanted to cover this attack. That's kind of a breach point. Wherever I covered that in the show, that's where I realized that there's definitely some territorial stuff going on and not just attacking to feed. So that's our story of Omar Conger. A 15-foot great white shark ends up doing major damage to his legs. He had bites to his legs, to both sides of his legs, on his buttocks, on his lower back, it sounds like the hip, and then he had defensive wounds on his hands. So multiple bites. The coroner said that he died of multiple bites, bleeding out from multiple bites, and it sounds like it pretty much stayed on his legs the whole time, and he reached down to try to, get the shark off of him. 15-foot shark, there's nothing, that's probably what this thing looks like, 15-foot shark. You ain't gonna get that off you. It's not gonna happen. So that's the attack on Omar Conger, an attack, not an attempt to predate, by a 15-foot great white shark. And I hope you join us in a few more days for another attack. As always, if you go into that water, you are much more afraid of those sharks than they are of you.